Hi, welcome to Chapter Book Storytime. I'm Ellen from EVPL Oakland, and on today's edition of the Variety Pack, I have a new fantasy book for you I think you'll like. It's called The Myth of Monsters, 𝑀𝑒𝑑𝑢𝑠𝑎 by Catherine Marsh. If you're a fan of Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, or if you are interested in Greek and Roman mythology, this is the book for you. Let's get started. This is the story of Ava Baldwin. Usually she can control her temper. Her mother has given her tools to do that. But today, on the first day of school, she just has had enough and she can't control her temper any longer. Let's find out what happens. Chapter 1, The Myth of Monsters, 𝑀𝑒𝑑𝑢𝑠𝑎. Ava Baldwin hadn't meant to lose her temper, but Owen King deserved it. The trouble began the first week of 7th grade in language arts. As part of a unit on Greek myths, everyone had to choose a god or goddess to write a report on. Ava, who loved mythology, already knew who she was going to pick. She was the second shortest girl in the 7th grade, and probably would have been the shortest if her wild brown curls weren't constantly escaping her tight French braid. So she raised her hand extra high so Ms. Greenberg could see it. "Ava," Ms. Greenberg said. But before she could finish, Owen shouted out, "Athena!" "Is your name Ava?" Ms. Greenberg asked him.
"Yes, Miss Greenberg,"
Owen said in a high, squeaky voice that sounded nothing like Ava. The class laughed, and so did Owen. Even Isabel and Evelyn tittered along. They'd been Ava's best friends all through elementary school, writing stories together and obsessing over their favorite books. But in the middle of 6th grade, they changed. Instead of adventures and magic, they wanted to talk about the popular kids, and they were always on their phones. Ava still hung out with them, but it wasn't that much fun. She felt as if they tolerated her presence rather than really wanted to include her, and soon enough, they weren't even doing that. By spring, she'd learned that they were ditching her to hang out at the mall with a big, noisy group that even included a few couples. Owen, with his blonde hair and twinkly blue eyes, was one of the popular boys. He was always talking over girls and making dumb jokes, but somehow everyone, even teachers, seemed to love him. Ava forced a smile as if she found his impersonation funny, but her chest tightened with anger. She tried to do the deep breathing her mom had taught her to calm herself down. Inhale, 2, 3. "Athena's cool," Owen continued, as if Ms. Greenberg hadn't signaled for him to wait his turn. "I mean, everyone likes Zeus and Poseidon and all those guys, but she's this super strong girl." Ava had chosen Athena for a similar reason. She was the only goddess who ever seemed anywhere near as powerful or as interesting as the male gods. But Ava couldn't say that now. Exhale. 4, 5. "I like the way you think, Owen," Ms. Greenberg said. "More boys should read about strong girls and goddesses." Ava forgot all about her breathing and lurched upright in frustration. Had Miss Greenberg forgotten that girl power Owen had just cut her off? Owen's self-satisfied smile made her fume. "So I get Athena, right?" he asked. Before she could stop herself, Ava called out, "Miss Greenberg, I was going to choose Athena." "Ava, let's remember to raise our hand." What? Miss Greenberg had been completely unfair. Owen hadn't raised his hand once. Ava started to raise hers to point this out when she noticed Isabel roll her eyes and whisper something to Evelyn. Last spring, after Ava had confronted Isabel for leaving her out, Isabel had texted, "You're really intense. It's not fun for everyone else." Was she being too intense now? She tried to think about what the others would do in her place. Isabel would probably find Owen's enthusiasm for Athena cute. Evelyn would pick a different god as if it was no big deal. Ava let her hand fall back down. "How about this?" Miss Greenberg smiled, as if she'd found some fantastic solution. "You and Owen can both write about her. There's only 12 major gods and goddesses, so everyone's going to have to double up anyway. You two will be our Athenas." Well, this didn't strike Ava as fair at all, especially when a few other girls who clearly had also wanted to write about Athena grumbled in disappointment. Ms. Greenberg had just let Owen shove ahead of all of them, but it seemed unwise to challenge a teacher, especially the first week of school. "Fine with me," Owen said, though no one had asked him. "Ava," Ms. Greenberg said. Ava scanned the room. No one else looked upset. Olivia and Sophia, two of the girls who had wanted Athena, were whispering, probably about their second choices. Isabel was impatiently tapping her fingers on her desk like this was taking forever and it was all Ava's fault. "Sure," Ava said, but deep down she was still mad. "Wonderful," Ms. Greenberg trilled. "Ava, I think your brother chose Athena too. I still remember his report. It was very creative." Ava forced another smile, as if she relished being compared for the umpteenth time to Jackson, boy genius who'd won all the academic awards since kindergarten. Every teacher who had had her brother expected her to get the same perfect grades, and then was disappointed when she didn't. She tried at least to be agreeable, which her mom said was just as important, but it was a lot harder in middle school, where nothing seemed fair. Library was Ava's last period of the day, and usually her favorite. At lunch, she still sat with Isabel and Evelyn. Being ignored by them was less painful than circling this cafeteria with her tray or sitting by herself. At least in the library, she could hide out alone in the stacks, reading, and no one noticed. But today, her English class was supposed to find books for their god or goddess reports, and to make matters worse, Ms. Sanchez, the librarian, explained that a lot of the good ones had already been checked out by earlier classes. Searching the digital catalog, Ava found a book about Athena, goddess of heroes, that was allegedly not checked out. Keeping a careful eye on Ms. Sanchez, who did not like running, she sped-walked to the religion and mythology section on the other side of the library. But just as she got there, she realized she had forgotten to close out the page with her search results. When she glanced back, Owen was standing right in front of it. Ava had barely scanned the shelves when she heard Ms. Sanchez barking at him to walk. She raced through the call numbers, 292.13 TA, 292.13 TE, until she saw Goddess of Heroes on the top shelf. But just as she reached up, a hand darted over hers and snatched the book from the shelf. "Hey!" Ava blurted, spinning around. "Give it back!" Owen stuck his free hand, palm up, in the air. "What?" he asked innocently. Ava's face burned. "You know what?" Her voice was loud, but quivery. "Whoa, Ava," he said. "It's just a library book. You can borrow it when I'm done." He sounded calm, reasonable. Ava knew if she spoke again, she wouldn't sound like him. Words would come out that she couldn't control. She hated feeling this way, like she might explode into a million pieces in front of everyone. Other kids were looking at her, including Isabel and Evelyn. She needed to get control of herself, but it was too late for breath counting. She tried to imagine she was in the pool. Her mom had taught her to swim as soon as she could walk. Last spring, after Evelyn had stopped returning her texts and Isabel had a sleepover party without her, swim practice with her rec team was the only activity that made her feel better. But thinking about water only opened the floodgates. "Oh no," she thought, "I'm going to cry." "Ava, are you okay?" Isabel said with a hint of annoyance. The message was clear. She was being too intense again, embarrassing herself. Owen gave a shrug, as if he had no idea what was wrong with her, as if it had nothing to do with him. Ava just wanted to get away, but everyone was staring at her, waiting for her to answer. "Fine," she muttered. "It's just—" "Chill out, Ava," Owen interrupted. "It's not a big deal." With a pop, Ava's pent-up anger exploded. An electric surge of rage coursed through her entire body, from her toes to the top of her head. Her vision narrowed, her muscles tightened. She took a step toward Owen, locked her eyes on him. "I was the one who found it," she shouted, "and taking my book right out of my hands was a big deal. It was a big deal to me." Her voice was shaking, and her brow was all sweaty. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see her frizzy curls sticking out all over the place. But Ava no longer cared what she looked like or what her former friends thought. She kept glaring at Owen. His mouth had fallen open, but he just stared at her with his clear blue eyes, looking stunned. Ms. Sanchez careened around the corner. "Ava Baldwin, what is going on? That's not a library voice." Just like that, Ava's anger sputtered out, replaced by shame. She wondered if Ms. Sanchez would call her mom. She had never gotten in trouble at school before. She looked down at the floor. "Owen took my—" "Is he okay?" Isabel interrupted. Ava looked up, realized Owen hadn't moved at all. He was still staring at her with the same dumbfounded expression. "Owen," Ms. Sanchez said. He stayed silent. Ava studied his face for a twitch of his lip or a flutter of his eyelid. No response. Ms. Sanchez ran right up to him and waved her hand in front of his face. Ava waited for him to burst out laughing or shout, "Psych!" But Owen didn't even blink. A trickle of drool ran down his chin. "Isabel, run and get the nurse now," Ms. Sanchez said. "Tell her Owen King is having a seizure." Then she jammed her finger into his open mouth and held down his tongue. "That's so he won't choke on it," said Sophia, whose mom was a doctor. Ava was sure Owen would finally give up his ridiculous act and cry out. It made her want to gag imagining Ms. Sanchez's red-painted nails grabbing her tongue. But he kept staring off into space. Panic engulfed Ava. I didn't do anything." "Well, of course you didn't," Ms. Sanchez snapped. "I just got mad." "Ava, this has nothing to do with you. Go sit down on the reading rug with your book. Everyone else, too." Ava scurried over to the reading rug. Of course it wasn't her fault. But that wasn't what mattered. The story would be around the entire middle school in no time. Who would want to sit with her or be her friend when angry Ava might freak out on them? She caught Evelyn's eye, hoping for a look of sympathy, but Evelyn turned away. Ava had never felt so alone. After school, Ava tells her mother everything that happened and what happened to Owen. So Ava's mom calls to Owen's house just to see how he's doing. He's fine, he's feeling better, a little groggy, but he'll be fine, and he's going to go to school tomorrow. But Ava and Jackson, they don't. We're going to jump ahead to chapter 3. That night, Ava had a hard time falling asleep. When she finally did, she dreamed she was back in school, wandering around the cafeteria with her tray because no one would sit with her. She kept shrinking until she was so tiny that Owen could step on her. She awoke with a start and a sickening feeling of having to go to school. But the sun shining through her window seemed too bright. And when she looked at her alarm clock, it was almost 9. Had her mom let her stay home after all? It seemed unlikely. She went next door to Jax's room, expecting to find his shades up and his bed empty. But he was fast asleep too. What was going on? If the power had gone out, the numbers on her clock would be flashing. Plus, her parents never slept this late. "Jax," she said, shaking him. "What?" he said, pushing her hand away. "It's 9 o'clock." He shot upright and stared at his side table. "What happened to my phone?" "I don't know," Ava said. "Oh, I set the alarm. My biology quiz is right now." He tore downstairs, his hair standing on end in all directions. Ava raced after him. "Mom, Dad," he shouted, "where's my phone? Why didn't you wake me?" Her mom was fully dressed, her hair blow-dried neatly into place, though she had dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept much. She made no move to get up from the breakfast bar where she was drinking coffee. Even more oddly, Ava's dad hadn't left for work. "What's going on?" Ava said. Her dad handed Jax his phone. "Sit down, kids. We have some good news." "Well, it better be good," Jax said. "I'm missing my first bio quiz." "It doesn't matter," her mom said calmly. Ava almost laughed at the way Jax's eyes bugged out. "Well, of course it matters. I need a perfect score on every quiz." "You need more of a challenge," her mom interrupted, "and Ava needs a change of scene, which is why, after serious consideration, your father and I have made an important decision." "Your mom made a call early this morning," her dad said, pausing before he added, "to the Accademia." Ada knew her mom had gone to an international boarding school for gifted kids in Venice, Italy. It was called the Accademia del Forte, and Ava had always figured Jax would eventually follow in her mom's footsteps. The Accademia can take you both. Isn't that great news? Her mom continued. It's a classical education, Ava. You'll study ancient Greek and Latin and read your beloved myths in their original languages. Venice is the most magical place in the world. It's made up of all these tiny islands, and there are no cars, just footbridges and boats. The students are gifted kids from all over the world, and the food is incredible. Plus, the school has an Olympic-sized pool and an excellent swim team. The school year begins next week, so you won't miss anything. Ava couldn't believe it. Here was her do-over, her second chance. She didn't even need to hear about the food or the pool or the other students. She'd never see Owen again. She could have a fresh start. She could make new friends. I'm in, said Ava. When do we leave? Hold on, Jack said, frowning at their mom. Last year you said I couldn't apply. Her mom shrugged. I didn't think Ava was ready. What does Ava have to do with me? I wanted you two to start together, their mom said. So now she gets 2 extra years there? That's not fair. Ava couldn't help feeling smug. For once, Jax was jealous of Ava. Maybe they're sending me earlier because I'm actually more gifted. Losing friends, he said. At least I have friends to lose. Had. Knock it off, their dad said. They glared at each other. Personally, their dad continued in a calmer voice, I think Ava is a little young for boarding school, but your mom says it's one of the best schools in the world, so we're counting on you, Jax, to keep an eye on your sister. Yeah, I get it, Jack said with a sigh. I'm going to babysit Ava. But at least I finally get to go. Ava clapped her hands together. When do we go? I just bought tickets for the day after tomorrow, her mom said. I figured there was no point in returning to school now, so I let you sleep in. Definitely no point, Ava said. We'll have a day or two to explore the city together before orientation, her dad said. Ava started dancing around. Will I have a roommate? Is there a uniform? What are the teachers like? Do I need to know any Italian? Let's start by doing some laundry and packing, her mom said, and I'll try to answer your questions. Not long after that, Ava and her family are in Venice, Italy, at the Accademia. All new students and their parents are ushered into the Great Hall. We're now in Chapter 4. True to its name, the Great Hall was an enormous room dotted with round oak tables with clawfoot legs. Light blazed from a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows and from 3 giant crystal chandeliers. Ava wasn't the only one transfixed by it. A logjam of other students stood by the door, staring up at the 2-story high ceiling, covered with frescoes of the Greek gods. Ava instantly recognized Zeus, who was carrying a thunderbolt, Poseidon, who had his trident, and Hades, who wore his helmet of invisibility. They were engaged in a battle with a man carrying a sickle and leading a horde of giants. Anyone know what's going on there? Asked a young woman with a name tag that identified her as Ms. Cleo. Her brown hair was pinned into a tight bun, and she clutched a thick book. Ava raised her hand, and Ms. Cleo pointed to her. It's a scene from the Titanomachy, the war where the Olympians, led by Zeus and his brothers, defeat Zeus's father, Cronus, that's the man with the sickle, and his fellow Titans. Ms. Cleo applauded, and the other students and their families joined in. Great job! She squinted at Ava's name tag. Ava said proudly. I can tell Ava is going to be a force to reckon with in my double period of Greek and Roman myths, Ms. Cleo said. There's a double period on myths? Ava whispered to her mom. It's one of the requirements of the first form, her mom whispered back, using the Academia's term for 7th grade. Ava grinned. Oh, you should have told me that. Yes, said Miss Cleo. The girl with the orange hair pointed to the ceiling. Ava hadn't even noticed her hand up. Why aren't there any women? She asked in an Irish accent. Ava inspected the battle scene. It featured the Olympians and their allies, hurling rocks and thunderbolts at Cronus and his Titan brothers. But the girl was right. There wasn't a single goddess in the painting. Women didn't play a major role in the Titanomachy, Miss Cleo said. And you are? Thea, the orange-haired girl said. But didn't some of the female Titans... A few threw their support to Zeus, Miss Cleo interrupted. But it wouldn't be accurate to call them important players. Thea scowled, but before she could argue further, Ms. Cleo cleared her throat. As you know, we have students from all over the world. To welcome you to the Accademia del Forte and to celebrate the diversity of our students, we've arranged for every student to take a DNA test to learn about his or her ancestry. Choose any table and a teacher will get you started. Alumni parents, Headmaster Orion has requested your presence for a special reception in the library. Non-alumni parents, please follow me on a brief tour of the school and an introduction to its history. There was a burst of activity as everyone took off in separate directions. Jax dashed over to the nearest table, probably eager to lose her and start brown-nosing the teachers. Ava waited to see where Thea was going. She followed her to a table at the back of the Great Hall. An acne-scarred teacher in a wheelchair sat beside it, handing out test tubes. Mr. Heff read his name tag. "Spit into the test tube up to the line," he instructed, "then hand it back." Ava spit into a test tube, then positioned herself next to Thea. "I liked your question." Thea stopped spitting. "That teacher was wrong. Rhea, Zeus's mom, gave birth to him in secret so his father Cronus couldn't swallow him. There wouldn't even be a Titanomachy if Rhea hadn't saved Zeus first. Rio also gave Cronus a stone wrapped in a blanket to fool him into thinking he was swallowing his own son," Ava said. Ava didn't know what to say to that, but luckily just then Mr. Heff called their names. "Well, Ava, you're a real mix," he explained. "You have Southern European, West African, Scandinavian, French, and undetermined." 15% undetermined, Ava noticed. That's a lot. "I have 10% undetermined," said Thea, looking over her shoulder at the results, "which is weird because I thought I was 100% Irish." "No one today is 100% anything," Mr. Heff said, "but some people are mixed in more interesting ways than you'd think." "What's so interesting about being undetermined?" Thea asked. "It just means they can't figure out that part of you." "Not exactly, Thea," said Mr. Heff. "It means a percentage of your DNA doesn't fit into any of the existing genetic populations of—" "Heff!" a gruff voice from behind interrupted. Ava turned around to find an ancient-looking couple standing behind her. The old woman was wrinkled and hunched. The old man, whose cragged face resembled the woman's, scowled at them. "Miss Myra has an entire lesson prepared on the science," he said. The old woman wagged her finger. "Don't rush it." Before Mr. Heff could reply, the two of them scuttled away. Ava thought they moved with surprising speed considering their age. "Who was that?" Thea asked. Mr. Heff's face turned bright red. "Mr. Morris teaches math. His sister, Ms. Moira, teaches life sciences. He's right. She'll explain it all much better than I can. I teach design lab." "They look like they've been here for 1,000 years, Thea said. "Longer than that," Mr. Heff said. "I like him. He's funny," Thea said as soon as they were out of Mr. Heff's earshot. "But that old geezer was rude. I wanted to hear what Mr. Heff had to say." "Me too," Ava agreed. Ms. Cleo's voice rang out over the hall. "Children, it's time to say goodbye to your parents. They're gathering on the front porch." The moment of parting had finally come. Ava had imagined saying goodbye to her parents hundreds of times. Just thinking about it made her eyes tear, especially when she pictured hugging her mom for the last time. But as she and Thea joined the other students flocking to the front door, Ava realized she was actually okay. Hopefully she'd even made a friend. She warned herself not to get too excited, though. She'd thought Isabel and Evelyn were her friends, until they weren't. She was having a much better beginning to her new school year. But when she stepped outside, she heard a commotion. A circle of teachers surrounded Mr. Moros, who lay on the floor. Ms. Moira crouched next to him, fanning his face. His eyes were open, but he didn't move. "What happened?" Ava said. "He just fainted," Mr. Orion announced to the gathered crowd. "It's the heat. He'll be okay." As the other teachers lifted up Mr. Moros and carried him back inside, Ava spotted her mom and dad standing across from the circle of teachers and parents. Her mom's eyes were wet and teary. Ava ran up to her. "Mom, are you okay?" Her mom nodded, wiped at her eyes. "She's just a little emotional about saying goodbye," her dad said. At this, her mom threw her arms around Ava and buried her face in Ava's hair. "Mom, I'll be fine," Ava said. "Really, I like it here." Ava could feel her mom's head bob up and down in agreement, but she still didn't speak. She just clung silently to Ava. Ava had expected to be the one fighting back tears while her mom reassured her, not the other way around. It made her feel braver, but also sorry for her mom. She was so upset she couldn't even get out a goodbye. Just then, Mr. Orion joined them. "You need to lie down and rest, Melanie," he said, his voice brimming with concern. He put his enormous arm around Ava's mom's shoulder. "Here, let me walk you to a gondola." Ava's dad gave her and Jax a final hug and then scurried after them. "I've never seen Mom that upset," Ava said to Jax. "I mean, she couldn't even talk." Jax shrugged. "She looked frightened when that old teacher went down, but it's also hard for her to leave us, especially you. She kept going on about how I'm supposed to watch out for you." Jax pointed across the steps. "Anyway, Mom's fine now. Look." Headmaster Orion was whispering something into Mom's ear. Whatever it was, it made her smile. Ava was glad to see her looking like herself again, but she wished her mom would turn back one last time and call out to her, so Ava could hear her voice. Ava's mom was right. The food at the Accademia is great. And after their first supper at the school, Headmaster Orion addresses the children. "I hope everyone enjoyed their dinner," Headmaster Orion bellowed. Some kids shouted out, "Yes," while others clapped. "Excellent, because now it's time to get down to business." Ava waited for the headmaster to continue, but he paused, scanning the room. "Earlier today, Ms. Cleo directed your attention to the marvelous fresco above your heads. One of your fellow students was able to identify the Titanomachy." Ava blushed as several faces turned to her. "And its victorious heroes, the Olympian gods." "And goddesses," Theo muttered under her breath. "But now it's time to expand your understanding of why this fresco is so important to us at the Accademia del Forte. The most powerful of Olympian gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, founded this school." Ava waited for Mr. Orion to add, "That's the legend anyway," with a wink or a grin, but he continued to stare down at them with a solemn expression. "I know what I'm about to say will come as a surprise, but the Greek gods and goddesses are alive and well." "Oh, good," Thea whispered dryly. "The goddesses finally got some credit for being alive, which is a real accomplishment when they're immortal." Ava bit her lip, trying to stifle a laugh. Surely this was some sort of bedtime story. She had to give Mr. Orion credit, though. He was doing an excellent job of staying in character. "The Olympians not only founded this school, they still run it today," he declared with a straight face. "All hail Zeus!" a boy at the table next to Ava shouted, looking for a laugh. Mr. Orion gave a tight smile. "You are lucky that the school has just started, young man, and you don't yet understand where or who you are. But mock the gods like that again, and you will be given a strike. 3 strikes, and you will be thrown out of the Accademia, which I can assure you is a fate no one wishes. Show respect." With that, Mr. Orion lifted his head. A thin ribbon of water spiraled up from the boy's goblet, then hung in the air, swirling in front of him. The boy stared up at it, mesmerized. "How'd he do that?" Thea asked. Before Ava could answer, coils of water sprang into the air from every goblet and pitcher in the room and combined to form shapes. Dolphins leaping over waves, a herd of flying horses, a whirling ring of dancers. Ava stared up speechless. The entire great hall had fallen silent. Was this a trick, like at one of those magic shows? Other kids may have been thinking the same because a few of them, including the boy who'd hailed Zeus, started to applaud. But before anyone could join them, the swirls of water combined into waves and scooped up the applauding students. Terrified shrieks filled the room as they were carried high over the tables on foamy swells. Fia turned pale and eyed the door. "I feel seasick." But Ava was too amazed to respond. This couldn't be a magic trick. The only person who could make kids fly and water defy gravity was a god. Mr. Orion made a diving motion with his hand, and the waves broke, dropping the kids gently back into their seat. Ava heard Fia let out a breath. "All hail Poseidon," the boy who'd hailed Zeus said in a quivering voice. "I am hardly the great Poseidon," Mr. Orion said. "Merely..." The headmaster's name suddenly made sense. "His son," Ava said. "The giant Orion was also known as the Great Hunter." "Very perceptive, Ava," Mr. Orion, or actually Mr. Orion, said. "I don't like this," Fia said, but she kept her voice low, a whisper. "There is other magic at work at the Accademia," Mr. Orion explained calmly. "You are all speaking your native tongues, and yet Hermes has cast a spell so you can understand one another." "I was wondering how you all spoke Vietnamese," said the boy from Vietnam, who was sitting across the table. "You just said that in Polish," said one of the girls next to him. "I'm hearing you all in Spanish," said Matthias, the boy from Uruguay. To Ava, they were all speaking English, but she was distracted by a bigger question. Her mom must have known the Accademia was run by gods. Why hadn't she told Ava? Ava was certain that the answer had to do with who the Greek gods were running the school for in the first place. She nudged Fia. "The ancestry tests." But Fia was still nervously eyeing Mr. Orion. "What?" "That's why they had us do them. It wasn't just a fun activity. There's a reason the gods selected us. Our ancestry." Fia swung around, stared straight at Ava. "You think we're descended from Greek gods?" "Yes," Ava whispered. "It's the only thing that makes sense. The gods set up this school for kids like us because we're demigods." Fia's brow wrinkled. "You sure?" "Now, probably you're wondering why you're here," Mr. Orion said. "You can say that again," said Fia. "Listen," Ava whispered. "Each one of you is special," Mr. Orion continued. "The DNA we took from you today proves that you are not ordinary mortals." Ava beamed at Fia. She couldn't wait to find out which god or goddess she was descended from. She hoped it was Athena. It seemed possible. Jax had always been super smart, and both Mr. Orion and Miss Cleo had praised her intelligence. Her mom had been a star student too. Ava imagined getting to train with Athena's spear. Maybe she would get to keep an owl as a pet. Mr. Orion's booming voice rang out across the great hall. "This may come as a shock, but it's time you know the truth. You are the descendants of..." "Gods," Ava mouthed, leaning forward in her chair. But Mr. Orion said an entirely different word. "Monsters." At first, Ava is stunned. No way! She can't be descended from monsters. Jackson? Her mother? No, this has to be a mistake. But then she begins to think about what happened right before she came to the school. What happened in her old school with Owen in the library. Not only does she realize she's a monster, she knows which monster is her ancestor. It's Medusa, the Gorgon with the head full of snakes instead of hair. One look at Medusa would turn any man to stone. The Accademia was established by the gods so that the descendants of the monsters could learn to control their emotions and their powers to be well-meaning members of society. We'll see how that goes. This has been Chapter Book Storytime. Our book today has been The Myth of Monsters, Medusa by Catherine Marsh. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.